Hello, I'm Luciana Spracher, Director of the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. Today, I'm excited to bring you a little history bite, shining a spotlight on some of our lesser-known city employees from the past. As part of our Hungry for History series, our history bites are intended to give you a little taste of local history in your busy day. Today, we will be spotlighting City Hall's porters. Our published city histories from the past tend to focus on the mayors and elected officials, men appointed to the high-profile positions like city surveyor and clerk of council. They overlook and forget that the majority of the employees getting the day-to-day work done were laborers and working-class employees, and they particularly ignore the African-American employee, which was limited in his opportunities in the government, relegated to jobs like scavenger, laborer, and porter. The porter was the first position available to the Black employee in the City Hall building. When one thinks of a porter, they often picture the Pullman porters who worked the railroads, attending to passengers and carrying baggage. But porters were employed across a number of businesses, including hotels, offices, and shops. Porters were tasked with carrying packages, janitorial duties, and running around on all sorts of errands. The first time I became aware of the porters in City Hall was when I was researching the construction of the building, and Henry Willis made the newspaper a couple of times in connection with that project. Willis was reported as a porter in the Clerk of Council's office in 1903, at which time he had cut his hand on one of the architectural submissions for the proposed new City Hall. At that time, the city's headquarters were in the Old City Exchange, seen in these photographs, which would be torn down in 1904 to make way for the new City Hall building. So Willis was originally working in the Old City Exchange. As the new building was under construction, City Council approved several positions to help maintain the new building, including a custodian to oversee the building, an engineer or fireman to attend to the furnaces, 2 men to undertake the routine or general cleaning, and, as they call them, a couple of boys to run the elevator and handle general dusting and window cleaning. It is likely that all but the custodian and engineer positions were porter positions and available to African American men. When City Hall was completed, they threw open the doors in a grand reception for citizens to come through and inspect it. Henry Willis once again made the newspapers in a mention of, quote, all the colored porters that were on hand for the event. However, Willis's name was the only one listed in the paper, as he was called out for his immaculate white jacket that gave the promise of refreshments that did not materialize, a brilliant carnation that spoke eloquently and aggressively of the joyousness of the occasion, and his white knit gloves that seemed to deny the spirit of the remainder of his attire, suggesting a funeral or some other solemn event. Whatever type of event you thought he was dressed for, he was considered the hit of the evening among this contingent of the city's employees. Let's look at Henry Willis and see what the historical record tells us about him. He was born shortly after the Civil War in Savannah. In the 1880s, he married Katie Andrews. He worked as a barber in the 1890s before becoming a porter in the mayor's office in 1896, a position he held for 10 years. While the newspaper reported he was a porter in the clerk of council's office, the city directories consistently listed him as a porter in the mayor's office. It is likely that he served both offices simultaneously. He lived in a number of homes on Hardin Street in the Cuyler-Brownville neighborhood, including these 2 which were in the family for several decades. The new building that Henry found himself working in was modern, but still segregated. Here is an image of the mayor's office, which he would have been responsible for keeping in order. Porters operated the elevator, highlighted in the circle seen here, which at that time required someone at the controls. And on the basement level was the janitor's lavatory, which was right next door to the general lavatory. Without saying colored, this is an indication of the segregated facilities in the building. 1906, a new opportunity opened for Willis. Eugene Kimball had been the keeper of Laurel Grove South Cemetery, Savannah's municipal cemetery for blacks, since 1901, but it was discovered that he had let his bond lapse, but continued collecting money without having a surety. And it's not very clear from the articles I located, but he apparently was siphoning off money as it was referred to as a gigantic graft. When he was discovered, he fled from the city, and on August 1, 1906, City Council authorized a reward of $50 for his arrest and return. At that same City Council meeting, Council was presented with 2 petitions from African American citizens who were concerned that the actions of Kimball would jeopardize one of the few positions in city government that was open to them. They had worked hard to get an ordinance passed that set aside the Laurel Grove South keeper position for a person of color, and Council was considering repealing that ordinance after Kimball's misdeeds. In one petition, J.C. Simmons stressed that, quote, repealing of said ordinance would reflect greatly on the moral standing of our people and would insinuate that no Negro was honest. The petition commented that this position had been held by an African American. In fact, if not in name, ever since the cemetery was established in the 1850s, indicating that even before the keeper position was allocated to an African American, one was doing the actual work of caring for the cemetery, while a white man was officially getting the glory as keeper. They noted that the position was paid for by fees collected from the black community. In the second petition, signed by 41 people, including Porter Henry Willis, they stated, quote, there are but few elective positions held by the colored citizens of Savannah. Retaining this position was very important to the community. After consideration at 2 council meetings, City Council approved the petition's requests to reserve the position for a black person. They then called for candidates to submit applications to the Clerk of Council before their next meeting. And among the 9 applications received was this application from Porter Henry Willis, who pledged to diligently pursue and perform the duties and reflect due credit upon you for the honor. His application was endorsed by 19 ministers of gospel, including Reverend J.W. Carr, pastor of First African Baptist Church, and Charles Royal, prominent undertaker on West Broad Street. Their endorsement called Willis a man of sterling integrity, industrious and courteous to all. Henry Willis's 10 years as porter, working alongside the mayor, clerk, and alderman on a daily basis, no doubt influenced their decision to select him for the position. Willis was elected keeper of Laurel Grove South Cemetery on August 26, 1906. He served in this capacity for 23 years until his death in 1929 at the age of 62. When he was buried in the cemetery he had cared for on behalf of Savannah's African American community. In the city's 1915 annual report, P.D. Daffin, chairman of the Park and Tree Commission, under which the cemetery fell, noted, this cemetery has been kept in very good condition under the care of the present keeper, who seems to take personal interest in its upkeep. Willis seemed to be just the man for the job after the scandal of Eugene Kimball. And caring for the cemetery was a Willis family affair. Their family homes located on Hardin Street were a short walk from Laurel Grove South. Henry and Katie had 5 children, of which at least 2 worked in the cemetery. Middle child Robert worked as a laborer in the cemetery, and eldest child, daughter Carrie Bell, who married Rufus Rivers, succeeded her father as keeper when he passed away in 1929. I need to do some additional research on Carrie's time as keeper, but I wonder if that might reveal that she was the first female cemetery keeper of Laurel Grove South, and perhaps the first female amongst all the city's cemetery keepers, including for Laurel Grove North. Henry Jr. followed his father's footsteps in another way, working as a porter at the Grace Hotel in Chicago before his death at the young age of 34. To date, I have only identified 2 other City Hall porters, initially through their appearance in our list of registered voters. Eugene Simmons was a porter in City Hall from about 1914 until 1918. He was listed as both porter and elevator boy, though he was no boy at the time. Simmons was born in Savannah in 1896. After working as a porter for the druggist Prather & Company and as a porter for the business M. Walensky, he served 4 years in City Hall before becoming a letter carrier for the United States Post Office. At some point, Simmons and his wife Harriet moved to Philadelphia, where he was working as a letter carrier when he completed his World War II draft registration card in the early 1940s. Benjamin Jackson was actually the longest serving porter that has been identified so far, holding the position from about 1920 until 1934. He was married to Nelia, and before working in City Hall, he was a laborer at a local lumber mill and a block setter at a block factory. While he was City Hall porter, he also ran a green grocery business out of his home briefly. Unfortunately, I have not been able to track down images of any of these men, and the most tangible connection I have to them personally is their signatures on city records like this. City Hall's porters represent an important and overlooked group of city employees. Additional research and sources like the city directories and voter registrations will help bring to light employee rosters for Savannah's working class and laboring groups that help maintain and run the city. I hope you've enjoyed learning about City Hall's porters and will think about their work and contributions the next time you visit the building. I look forward to sharing our next History Bite with you soon.